chops.
This is a mic test to Caster. All right, I think we have a good mic check. Are you able to hear this, Sandeep? Mic test for YouTube. Okay.
in our meeting by, if you're here in the room and you'd like to make a comment, we have asked that you fill out a request to speak card that's located in the back of the room and bring it up and present it to our secretary. And if you're wanting to participate by phone, sometimes microphones are automatically muted, so if you wish to speak on an agenda item, dial *9 to virtually raise your hand when public comment is announced, and then when it's your turn to speak, you may need to dial *6 to accept the unmute request. When we have public comment, we'll first hear from the people in the room and then turn to the people who are participating remotely in that order. Let's see, I have a little bit bittersweet situation here today. A number of us are not going to be continuing service in the time ahead. And so we'll try to be mindful of that. Raul Perales, who is our vice chair, he let me know that he'll be a little bit late this morning, but he'll be here in a little while. So our members who will not be continuing into 2023 are Raul Perales, Jeff Harris, who I see is on Zoom today, Steve Miller, who has represented Sacramento Regional Transit since 2015, is here with us in the room, and Harry Price, who represents the Solano Transportation Authority, is also concluding his service with today's meeting. And then there's some guy named Jim Spearing, who has spent most of his adult life as a member of this board. In fact, I think he was represented Suisun City before it was a city, and then represented our board here before it was a board as well. And Jim, we have a special opportunity. We want to embarrass you in full. So I'd like you to join me in the middle of the room here. And Mr. Padgett, I think you're going to provide me with there he is. April's going to bring this to us. This is in case you fall asleep later. So we might be sure to present this to you. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
I would have dressed better if I could.
Well, you got pants on, so this is better than the Zoom environment. Jim, it's first of all, personally, I've really appreciated your friendship and your mentorship and your support for transit all through this region, the mega region, in fact, and your service to the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority is legendary. You were the first director, the first chair of our board. Your inspiration, your vision led to the creation of the Capital Corridor as an agency. You worked hard to get the legislation passed. You've worked hard to get a whole bunch of other stuff like the Fairfield-Suisun Station and like our vision plan. At every turn when we've needed you, you've stepped up in a creative, energetic way to be sure that our service is the best it can possibly be. And there's a subcleaner. Could you take that off?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. We've got a bit of a. There, it's gone. It's all good now. It was.
You don't need to read this. So don't read
I was going to read every page of it. It's a 14-page resolution. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Board of Directors of the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority does hereby recognize the significant contributions that Director Spearing has made to support and grow the success of the Capital Corridor service. Jim, for all of us, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
and we're going. Would you take a picture of us, please? This way, we'll know that this actually happened. Thank you for that indulgence, friends. That's a very special moment as a very special milestone for Capital Corridor. Very, very worth taking a minute to honor Jim. That's the conclusion of the report of the chair. And colleagues, there will be an opportunity for you to make your comments about Jim as well when we get to the concluding area. Now let's move now to the consent calendar. Do we have anything to remove from the consent calendar, Rob?
Make sure. Here we go.
It's unusual, isn't it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. No.
No. We do not have anything to remove from that consent.
Okay, is any member of the board interested in removing something?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All right, before we take so we have a motion from Director Rayburn and a second from Director Dufty. Before we take a vote, is there any public comment on this item? April?
I didn't receive any speaker cards, Chair Saylor, nor do I see any hands raised on Zoom. I did want to note, though, for items 3.1 and 3.2, would we like to take those separately? They're listed for action on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't.
No, we've concluded those items.
The chair and the vice chair. Chair and vice chair election.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, we'll go to that in a minute.
In a minute. Okay, sure. So
Thank
we'll
you.
move on to
You're right.
consent. Welcome.
We'll go to the consent calendar vote. Please call roll on the motion from Rayburn, second by Dufty, and then we'll come back to the election. Thank you.
Certainly. Chair Saylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peralez, Director Allen, Director Dufty,
Aye.
Director Freericks,
Aye.
Director Harris,
Aye.
Director Holmes.
Aye.
Oh, Director Holmes. Director
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Director Jane, Director Lee, Director McPartlin, Director Miller, Director Price.
Aye.
Excuse me, Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Rayburn,
Yay.
Director Saltzman. Yes. Director Spearing. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now we'll come back. I appreciate you reminding me. So item 3.2 is election of chair and vice chair for a 2-year term, 2020, beginning January 2023 and lasting through December of 2024. Let's have is there a motion to nominate someone for the chair role first? And we, of course, normally Raul Peralez, the vice chair, would be moving into that role. We'd nominate him, but he's not serving any longer. So is there a motion?
I'd like to move to appoint Robert Rayburn as chair.
Huddersfield seconds. Second by Frericks.
Well, that sounds pretty good, but Dufty already seconded it. So it's at this point, and thank you, Lucas and Bruce, for your support for that. Is there any other nomination before we take a vote? I don't see any other nominees. So we have a motion from Saltzman and second from Dufty to elect Robert Rayburn as our chair for 23-24. Please call the roll.
We do have a public comment hand raised, Chair Saylor.
On the election of the chair?
I believe so. The hand just went up.
Okay. Let's
proceed
hear
with public
from that person, whoever it is. Who is
Paul Sanfer.
okay. Paul, are you interested in commenting on the election of the chair and vice chair, or do you have other items you'd like to address?
Yes, Chair. This is Paul Safner. Just wanted to comment about the upcoming transition from your service, and really appreciate your service the last 2 years. And I'm looking forward to working with the new chair and the vice chair on a writer advisory committee. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment, and we'll get to that topic in a little while. So we have now a motion to elect Robert Rayburn. Please call the roll.
Chair Saylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peralez, Director Allen, Director Dufty.
Aye.
Director Freericks,
Aye.
Director Harris,
Aye.
Director Holmes,
Aye.
Director Howdeshell,
Aye.
Director Jane, Director Lee, Director McPartlin, Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Price,
Aye.
Director Rayburn,
Yay.
Director Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Spearing. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And do we have a motion to nominate a person to serve as vice chair for that 2-year period?
Bruce Huddersfield, Director Huddersfield.
Thank you.
Holmes makes motion.
Second by Frericks.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Jim Holmes and a second from Lucas Frericks to nominate Bruce Haudeschelt to serve as vice chair for 23-24. Is there any other nominee? Okay, very good. Is there any public comment on this item?
I see one hand raised. It's Paul, but I'll double check if it's not. Oh, his hand just went down.
All right, very good. Let's have call roll, please.
Chair Saylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Perales, Director Allen, Director Dufty. Aye. Director Frericks,
Aye.
Director Harris,
Aye.
Director Holmes,
Aye.
Director Howdeschel,
Aye, thank you.
Director Jane, Director Lee, Director McPartlin, Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Price,
Aye.
Director Rayburn,
Yay.
Director Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Spearing.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Well, friends, I'm just delighted. What a wonderful team of leaders for the next 2 years. So thank you, everybody. Now we'll go, Rob, to item 5-1, Capital Quarter Annual Performance Report. And this is for information.
This item, I'd like to introduce Priscilla Collecton, who will go through the approach and some of the content for our annual performance report. Priscilla is our communications officer.
Good morning. It's so nice to see everyone in this brand new space. Thank you for having us here. As Rob mentioned, I am here to present our FY22 annual performance report. Next slide. Thanks. And this will be really an overview that will illustrate the story of our FY22 performance for the federal fiscal year with an emphasis on our market recovery. We will be looking at an outline of our performance achievements, much as we had done in the past, with really an emphasis on a steady recovery and our bright future that we have ahead of us. Next slide. The presentation, as we did in the last year, we will do an all-digital version of the report using multimedia on a microsite with videos and graphics and animations for our charts. This will allow us to have shareable content that can be used across a variety of social media channels such as Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, so that we can really spread the word of our achievements and our success. And as well, we will be reducing our paper usage by not printing a booklet as we used to do every year in the past. Next slide. The key performance markers that we will include will be the same that we have done in the past. Our overall summary, which will be since CCJPA's inception, as well as a look at ridership revenue, fare bucks ratio, our on-time performance, and customer satisfaction, which is, of course, very key to our success, as well as a look at what our customer makeup looks like now, which is from our onboard survey results from June 2022. Next slide. Thanks. So here we have a summary of our FY22 service performance, and as you can see, we showed the FY19 comparison. We're still running quite behind in that last column. However, I'd like for you to take a look at that second to last column from the right, which is FY22 versus FY21. And I want to note that our ridership is up 99% from FY21, and our revenue is up 101% from FY21. So I think that that's a really big jump that we want to focus on and to continue to grow and build upon that in the future. But as far as achievements for FY22, I think that's really something remarkable to note. And we will be outlining a lot of information about our recovery path and what has gotten us to this point, which is service restoration, our 30th anniversary promotion that we had, our social media strategy that we have recently implemented, an emphasis on leisure travel, much more so than we have in the past, as well as continued health and safety communications. And I also will want to touch on the milestones that we've achieved towards the projects that we have that will be leading us into the future as we go. Most notably, CalITP, which is our contactless payment program, and the various capacity expansion projects and infrastructure investments that we will be continuing to work on. And with that concludes my presentation. I'd love to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Priscilla. Are there questions on, first, are there questions on any of our, from any of our colleagues in the remote settings? Any hands raised from the board members remotely? Yes.
Do you have hands raised? Yes.
Mr. Jane, thank you for being with us this morning. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm very sorry for joining late. And I'm sorry that I missed part of the presentation, but it seems to me that at one point we had a shortage of workforce. Can you explain how we're doing relative to workforce shortages? And then
We did.
and then I know that our on-time performance has dropped from a target of 90% to 83%.
Yes, Director Jane, the workforce shortage that we had was part of what you saw with our temporary reduction in service schedule in August. And my understanding is that Amtrak has staffed up and retrained and brought back additional workforce so that we were able to bring back our service schedule on October 3rd. And then, did you want to comment on that? Okay.
Yeah, and I'll talk in.
Okay, thank you. Any other directors participating remotely with questions or comments? Okay, anyone here in the room with questions or comments on this presentation? I don't see any. Thank you. I just one question. What is the timing? What timing do you anticipate for completion of the report?
We are hoping to have it in early January for release.
Okay, then it'll be all digital. This.
Yes, we have a number of pieces that we still have to put together, but I will definitely be sure to let everyone know.
I look forward to it. Thank you. I think we're ready for item 2 then, the Rail Safety Incentive Program for Cities, and this one is an action item.
Chair Saylor, excuse me, I'm sorry. We have a public comment hand raised on this
We have
item. We have a public comment hand raised.
I'm sorry, a public comment on the information item, yes?
Yes, it's Mike Barnbaum.
Okay, good morning, Mike.
Mike, please go ahead.
Hello, good morning. Yeah, I have a question or clarification on one of the statements mentioned near the end of the presentation. It was mentioned that on October 3rd, that service went back to what it is as full restoration. If I got everything that was mentioned, but it was my understanding that service restoration went back to full service only for weekends and holidays. And it was my understanding that on October 3rd, weekday service has yet to go back to the full pre-pandemic number of round trips. And that was likely not going to be anticipated to happen until sometime in 2023 at the soonest. Can I get a little clarification about the weekday service as compared to the weekend service? Thank you.
Rob, is that something you can address briefly? Okay.
Go ahead if you want to do that.
Hi, the statement that I made was actually referencing our change from going to a reduced service on August 15th, I believe it was, and then bringing back those levels on October 3rd to the same service plan.
And Mike, thank you for your question. If you have further questions on that, then you can email staff, email Priscilla or Rob, and you get a more thorough answer if you need it. Okay? I think we're ready to go to the item on Rail Safety Incentive Program for Cities.
Then red means it's on. Okay. All right. I'm learning how to use the technology in the new room here. So since next we'd like to introduce a program to encourage action along the corridor to address the really tragic and incredible surge in pedestrian fatalities and vehicle strikes that we've seen in recent months. Since just, and we have a map here that shows you a little bit of what our history has been in the corridor, but just since October 1st, we've now had 7 fatalities involving Capital Corridor trains, with 4 additional fatalities in our service area involving other trains, freight trains and other passenger service trains. We want to do everything possible to take advantage of new resources available at the state and federal level, but we know that communities need help getting to those resources. So Jim Allison today will talk about a program that we're going to sponsor here at Capital Corridor that we hope will bring some of those resources to the corridor. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Great, thank you, Rob. Jim Allison, Manager of Planning with Capital Corridor. This program that we've described in the board packet and on the slide here is really a catalyst program. And I mean that by, we have found that cities and counties just do not have the staff resources or the expertise to launch into a program to fix at-grade crossings, or at least improve the situation that we have. So we reached out to the Alameda County Transportation Commission, who did engage with their cities and also with county areas to build a program where they would develop a solution-oriented outcome for at-grade crossings or improvements to the right-of-way. The improvements that they had sought out were to improve safety in Alameda County, and they are now at a point where they were able to successfully apply for federal funding. Yes, one moment.
I'm sorry. Does someone have an additional Zoom going or something? There's sound is coming from over here somewhere.
I think it's coming from the video room.
Oh, I see. Okay.
All right, we're back on. So the Alameda County Transportation Commission was successful in gathering federal funding for grade crossing improvements. When we look at what Rob talked about along our corridor, we believe that if we implement a program using some of Capital Corridor's funds, we can be that catalyst and work with the different cities and jurisdictions along the route to identify solutions that could be applied in a future phase. So this is really the feasibility, the initial study kind of phase of things. We are very short-staffed at this point in time, so we do have on-call consultants, and we're going to really run this program through them, and they would really lead the charge in that. And that, again, follows what Alameda County was able to do. So we'll support with outreach to the different jurisdictions, and then include funding of roughly up to $50,000 worth of consultant help to develop a program. And the total amount that we're looking at is up to $750,000. This, if implemented and approved, would lead towards an understanding of the next phase, which would be the design phase. Through this, we could build a program to apply to the federal or state government options for funding to develop a program to go to that next step, to design the solution, engage with the city public works departments on what the crossings would look like. And then finally, once that phase is done, then we can go to a construction phase. So this is a first building block to develop a program of this nature. And with that, I'll submit any questions to the board. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much. Are there any colleagues online who have a comment or question of Mr. Allison about this program? Is there anyone with a hand raised?
Director Jane has his hand raised.
Okay, I can't. So Director Jane, thank you.
Yes,
Director
sir.
Jane, do you have a question?
Yes, a couple of questions. This is certainly a much needed program. And, you know, when I look at a train strike, this is a Union Pacific one, but this was on October 2nd. And the train struck a vehicle 6 miles west of Sassoon Fairfield Station. And, you know, that's very tragic. But then the impacts on our customers are tremendous. You know, train 741 was terminated. Train 732 was 4 hours and 48 minutes late. Train 743 was 2 hours and 50 minutes late. Train 736 was 3 hours and 22 minutes late. So, were I a customer riding on any of those trains, I would be extremely irate. Now that was, to my understanding, happened on private land. It was not in, say, a municipality, which this program covers. And I was just wondering if there was any money available to try to also improve crossings on private land. So that was my question.
Very good. Rob or Jim, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment on that. So it is a very good question. And going back to the earlier comment on on-time performance, our on-time performance has not been good this year. It's far below our 90% goal. We've actually been as high as 94% in history. And if you look at the details of why that is happening, it is largely the result of issues with either trespasser issues or vehicles on tracks. We have actually been doing pretty well on mechanical delays and other delays. So until we deal with this issue, it will be very difficult for us to bring our on-time performance back to where we think it should be. This program is addressing only a piece of the problem. And what we're trying to do here is get rid of any friction. So if there's a city out there that really doesn't have the ability to do this, they don't have a contract mechanism available, we want to give them a really easy way to do something. If they need a little bit of money to get started, we want to give them that encouragement. But there are programs outside of this, going to your question about private crossings or even just informal crossings. We are working on pulling together a larger program to do fencing along extended stretches of our corridor, and we do intend in later years to apply for one of the federal programs. We think the Christie program in particular is good for that. So we're going to attack this from a lot of different places. The thing that I would ask of anybody listening, and certainly of the board members, is, and I know some of you already are doing this, is work with our local communities, encourage them, let them know there's state dollars available, federal dollars available. This is a window of opportunity to make this a safer corridor. And we very much appreciate any efforts to do that, and we are here to help.
Very good. Thank you. Other comments or questions remotely? And then is there anybody else remotely?
I don't see any hands raised.
Very good. So Director Saltzman and then Director Spearing.
I think this is a great idea, an innovative solution to help out some of the smaller cities, especially. I'd like for you to come back, though, at a future date and talk to us about what other things you're doing. I know, for example, in Alameda County, where we are right now, is very focused on getting some of this funding for addressing these issues. So I'd like to know more what we're doing with our county transportation commissions, other entities like this to kind of coordinate, support their work, other efforts beyond just cities.
Absolutely. And I will say Alameda County is a model for what can happen. I was fortunate to host the Deputy FRA Administrator here on Monday. And one of the places we stopped at was the High Street crossing, which is actually one of the most dangerous crossings in the state of California. So we are talking to the federal officials who are also quite interested in addressing this vexing problem.
Very good. Thank you. Director Spearing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you need to include, I think it's on. Am I on? Yeah, okay. I think you need to include county social services. I really think when you meet, first of all, we should be asking the cities to pass resolutions that there's no homeless encampments in the corridor, that they support that. And the other is, if we can get the cities and county social services together, I mean, we've got a place to move those people. We can actually deal with them. It's a fairly small number for both the county and the cities, but I really think that we've got to team up the counties and the cities to help address this problem, not just and I agree with Board Member Saltzman, the transportation authorities ought to be in that meeting. So if you have the cities, county, and the transportation authority, and that garners a lot more resources to address this issue.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Any others? Do we have any requests for public comment?
I didn't receive any speaker cards, and I don't see any hands raised at this time.
All right. I want to just agree with Director Saltzman that this is a wonderful program. I really like this. It's only part of the solution, but it's a good step, and it really will engage a lot of folks. And I think the comments about including larger stakeholder partnerships should be one of the things that we can emphasize as we release this for request for proposals.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize this is our funding, so we can create it how we want to create it. So we can accommodate those recommendations, which are excellent.
Excellent. Good. So you need a motion for us to authorize this?
That is correct.
So moved.
Second.
Great. So we have a motion from Miller and a second from Dufty. Any further discussion? Okay. Don Cini, please call roll.
Chair Saylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Perales,
Yes.
Director Allen, Director Dufty. Aye. Director Freeriks,
Aye.
Director Harris,
Aye.
Director Holmes,
Aye.
Director Howdeschelt,
Yes.
Director Jane,
Yes.
Director Lee, Director McPartlin, Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Price, Director Price, Director Rayburn,
Yay.
Director Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Spearing. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
That brings us to item 5.3, the capital project update.
So as you know, we highlight one of our capital projects at each of these meetings and also take questions on other capital projects. And I'm really excited today to introduce Jim Allison. Again, Jim is busy today, who will talk about our Carquinez crossing study. And this is the kind of project that we really would not have contemplated were it not for this significant federal program that we see emerging. And we think this is the kind of project that can really allow us to accomplish what we've laid out in this vision plan and open up many, many doors. So with that, I will turn it over to Jim, who has a really interesting presentation, and I encourage questions today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim Allison, Manager of Planning with Capital Corridor. In the audience today, we have Buzz Berger with HDR, who is certainly leading the study at our direction. We were also partners on the study with Caltrans, Division of Rail and Mass Transportation, and we had the participation of Union Pacific. So we'll talk today about the reasons for the study, the approach that we've taken on this, and the goal of today is to end the day with passing a resolution that directs us to do further feasibility study on engineering with some routes along certain corridors that we will identify. So we'll also discuss the evaluation process and the results of this preliminary screening. I will note that you will have received in your supplemental mailing an analysis of some mathematical principles involved in ranking the options that we present. That is for your reference, and there is also a one-page fact sheet. So we were hoping that information would increase your knowledge as you enter this, because this is a complex subject. So the existing Sassoon Rail Bridge, built in 1930, they don't make the parts for it anymore. So if it fails, they have to manufacture them. It is a lift bridge that has to clear for marine traffic. Marine traffic has the right of way. We do work with the bridge tenders, and we share our schedule, and they do work with marine traffic to try to prioritize if the ships can slow down, but sometimes that can't happen to let a train through. So this is anywhere from, the bridge delays are anywhere from our number 2 to number 3 cause of delay on our corridor today. And that delay is roughly 20 plus minutes. Sometimes you can catch the last bit of it and it's less than that, but there's times when multiple ships go through and it can be 40 minutes. If we consider this situation looking forward and we look to our vision plan where we would increase service, we cannot withstand an increase in service to, say, half-hourly schedules in the peak with a bridge like this that would lift. It would reduce our on-time performance to very, very substandard, and that's not what we want to pursue. As well, these kind of cascading delays hit other trains, we get out of slot, and there's very narrow windows of where we can dispatch our trains, and then it has cascading effects. So this is a big improvement, and it really can set the stage for increasing frequency between Sacramento and Oakland, and it falls right into Link 21 as well. So what we've done in this study approach is at this point in time just to look at the engineering and feasibility of possible options. So we've used our vision plan, we've used Link 21 and the state rail plan to guide where and what we would consider to build in the future, to analyze in the future. So we've identified corridors, and you'll see that on the map soon. And corridors will have at least one representative route. They may have other routes on them as well. So important to distinguish between a corridor and routes. What we've done when we get to it, looking at corridors, we look at the different routes that could exist in those corridors, and we've selected a representative route supporting the kind of train service we have today, 79 miles an hour. And this would involve new bridges and approach structures for each of those alternatives. And then finally, we just developed a high-level screening assessment for the different routes. Part of that attachment I talked to you about from our Climate Corps fellow looked at the process of assessing that high-level screening, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. So moving into the corridors here, we have 4 major corridors. We have the Vallejo corridor in the orange color, the Benicia color is the green, the Franklin Canyon Pacheco color is the purple color, and then the existing shoreline is the blue color. And anchoring both ends of the study, we have the Sassoon Fairfield station and the Richmond station. So anything between those 2 points on those corridors is how we would assess the operational effect of the corridor. So that's all the conceptual routes run through those 2 points. So that was our basis of creating some equality amongst the routes and corridors. So we started with 14 representative routes within those corridors. You can see that there were a couple different corridors. For instance, kind of in the Vallejo section, there's roughly 3 of them. There's a couple of ones that go across Benicia, and then other ones that are much further to the east. We did eliminate corridors before presenting these options to the board. These were corridors that were eliminated because they were impractical. We did study tunnel options for all of these routes. The tunnels are roughly 2 to 3 times the cost of a bridge and approach structure. So those were eliminated. Tunnels, ironically, would have to be about as deep as the bridges are high to do this, which is to say it's 150 feet above water. You'd have to get down that low to do a tunnel. We also did eliminate some really environmentally impractical routes, and one I'd call attention to here is the one on the furthest to the west, which is on Mare Island, which is a very unstable soil condition to try to build a structure. It also crosses a navigable waterway, and it was just not a practical one to keep. So that's an example of one that we eliminated. So we narrowed the list down to 6 representative routes for further consideration. We have 2 in the Vallejo area, one that's in the purple that follows along the shoreline, and then other shoreline ones and other options. And I'm going to go into them each on their own so you'll see them distinctly. So this is the shoreline route. This roughly mirrors what we do today, and it would involve reconstructing approach structures near and around all the infrastructure that's in the route that you would see today. The Vallejo route, this is the one on the western side, involves getting onto an existing rail line that does go through Vallejo and then winds through American Canyon and connects up with Sassoon City. The I-80 route is very similar. It just follows on the an alignment closer to the existing I-80 bridge, road bridge. Then there's finally the Benicia route, which uses a little bit of Franklin Canyon, punches through. There are a few tunnels to get through different hill structures, and then it daylights as a bridge and then ends up being basically over the city of Benicia. So we'll talk about that one in a bit. And then it connects with our route that we have today. And then there's the Mococo route, which is much like the shoreline route, but it is on the most eastern side of the bridge structures. So these are the 6 routes. Oh, I forgot the Pacheco route. This is a route that goes through Franklin Canyon, which roughly parallels Highway 4, and it winds through that corridor and then daylights in Martinez and makes its way again. So these are the routes that we considered. The next thing we did to evaluate these routes against each other on a relative basis, we looked at 6 different roughly grouped criteria just to get through this. Now, I said this was an engineering study. It's almost impossible to just limit yourself to engineering, but we can at least look at some of the obvious effects of those options. So we did, as I said, compare rail operations. Again, those 2 points, we could equally compare how fast the running time would be using analysis that the consultants led. We can look at the environmental effects, the effects on natural resources. So for instance, does it go through a wetland or does it affect communities of concern? We can look at the effect of right-of-way, the effect of adjoining on properties, the amount of right-of-way needed to be acquired to make the route consistent across with the other options. The one that probably got the most interest was the technical complexity. This is all the lengths and the structures and the gaps that we would need for maritime. This one got a lot of attention and is almost a proxy for cost. So the more technically complex, you can imagine the cost goes up. Maritime compatibility was very important because of we have to make sure any structures in the channel do not disrupt existing or planned future services using the waterway. So there's a lot of traffic in that Carquinez area. There's docks, there's safe harbor areas and such. So we need to make sure our routes avoid that. And finally, the last one is called phased implementation. And this is really about the project. Can it be built in smaller chunks, or do you have to build the whole thing all at once? A good example of one that can be built in chunks is the shoreline run, meaning we, as you know, if you ride the train, we wind around the shoreline. It's a little slow. We can make that faster, but it does come at a cost of right-of-way. So, but you can phase that in later. With building a bridge structure and approach structure first, then you can come back in and make it faster. So the relative rankings did emerge among these routes, and we had that's the fact sheet that Lucille, if you want to wait, she did a analysis of the different options and mathematically looked at could they come out with a different answer if we weighted things slightly differently. Turns out the top 4 are pretty much the top 4. So we mapped these against the different criteria, and I'm just going to give you kind of a bad performer and a better performer on the screen here. This is the Benicia route. This was rated as not a top performer. This is not one that we'd want to continue with. The most notable thing, as I mentioned, it would involve a few tunnels on the Franklin Canyon side of it, but then when you get over to Benicia, you'll have a bridge over the community because you have to grab the approach. So we think this not doing very well with environmental effects. In fact, it is the lowest rated one. So we recommend not pursuing this. One that we do recommend pursuing is the shoreline option. This one comes out rated fairly high. It does have a lot of right-of-way costs, for instance, and that's what I talked about, but you can phase that in. So it has a pretty good phasing opportunity. But if you're really going to straighten out service and make it faster, it would come at a cost of dealing with the cliffs and other things like at that point. So when we bring this all together, if you can imagine kind of tracing the lines here, we have some of the best performing routes and some of the lowest performing routes. The routes that we want to move ahead with are the first top 4 there. and we'd like to eliminate further study of the Pacheco route and the Medina route. So we're going to eliminate some corridors from studying along with this too. So the highest performing corridors are the Vallejo corridor and the Shoreline corridor with their 2 route options. We will eliminate, if the board allows, the Benicia corridor and the Franklin Canyon Pacheco corridor. Those each had 1 route option each. The next piece of our study will be again an environmental study. An engineering study, engineering feasibility, to look more in depth at these remaining 4 options. We are going to save the planning work, in other words, looking at the effects on communities in more depth. That would be a future phase of doing feasibility studies. So with a project of this size and scale, and I can tell you that the cost of any of these options ends with a B, billions. So we want to do our due diligence at this phase and then move into a planning phase. And then we'd be actually, if we can narrow things down a bit more and complete those studies, we'd have a more informed approach overall to pursue a very impactful project for the Capitol Corridor, a very needed project for the Capitol Corridor, and one, as Rob said, does start to align with all the federal and state funding opportunities that are out there. So with that, if you have any questions that are technical, I'm going to duck and we'll have Buzz step up here. But I'll answer what I can, and we'll just field questions. This was a very informative study, and would love to have a good discussion and anything further on. There is a resolution here for this, and as Rob said, this is not usual that we have an action item on the capital updates, but in this case we do, because we want to move ahead to the next step. So with that, leave it open for questions or public comment.
I think the resolution you're referring to is on page 36 of the agenda packet that we have.
I hope so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we can take a look at that. Are there questions or comments among our remote participants, board members?
Director Jane has a comment.
Okay, Director Jane, a comment or question?
Yeah, I was wondering, are sea level rise, I would expect that they would be considered. Are they going to impact the shoreline route?
Yes, actually, that's a great question, and I glossed right over it, but we did look at every route alternative. We consider that we do adapt to sea level rise in the future. So that's an assumption built into the really the program. And Buzz, if you want to maybe say, and go red to, you can speak.
Thank you, Jim. We did address sea level rise in broad senses, as Jim mentioned. We would not pursue any options in the future that did not account for sea level rise. And so that is baked into the technical complexity scoring factor or weighting criteria there.
Very good. Thank you, Director Jane. Are there any other hands on the among remote participants?
I don't see any additional director hands raised.
Okay, how about here in the room? Mr. Rayburn.
Thank you, Chair Saylor, and thank you very much for this informative report. It's really exciting to consider an entirely new alignment through Vallejo. But under the operational characteristics, you indicate that freight traffic would be one of the considerations. And, I'm not certain that I want to say, yeah, we want to share our roads with freight or design them for freight locomotives that need a very low gradient compared to passenger rails. So what are your thoughts on, and in particular, when we look at Vallejo, I noticed that it scored in the middle, not at the top, with the operational characteristics. And did that freight element weigh in on this, or what's the deal here?
That's a very observant, and you're reading between the lines and reading what we're talking about. So there's an interesting conundrum with freight. It's as you observed, we do need to, if we're going to accommodate freight and work with UP as we really must, wherever you join, because you're back with UP, even if you depart from it, the grades have to be at freight level, and that means more support structures. So this also helps solve a goods movement issue. So that's on that side. It also opens us up to great partnership opportunities for federal funding. It solves a lot of problems to include freight. But on the Vallejo side, and Buzz will hopefully speak to this, it's very difficult to imagine freight being in that corridor. So you might leave, if they're not in that corridor, then they're left to their own devices with their 1930s bridge. And we will see them again up at Sassoon or down at Richmond, as we rejoin the corridor. So there's different pluses and minuses. We're not really weighing in on that, but we think it's a very important factor to consider. Maybe Buzz, if you have some more insight on the freight.
Sure, and as you pointed out, Director Rayburn, freight trains do require shallower grades than passenger trains, and that would increase the technical complexity if that route or any of the routes were to be built to accommodate freight trains. The Vallejo route in particular would use a relatively narrow corridor through Vallejo, at least as this concept has it. And if the Capital Corridor were to increase frequencies to hourly or half-hourly service, that corridor would not be wide enough likely to accommodate both freight and the Capital Corridor service. So because that factor was included in that weighting criteria, that's the result of or that is the reason for the lower Vallejo rating there.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Perales, and then Director Saltzman.
Yeah, thank you. Along the lines of this Vallejo route as well, we're not considering in the future that would open up an additional stop, correct? Like we're not analyzing that as far as what I'm seeing here, considering that it is so divergent, right? And you're talking about entering a couple different communities. Is that something that we're considering or no?
Yeah, it's a little buried in the slides, but we would imagine a station stop in Vallejo to grab that market in this way of thinking about it. I think Shannon Simons from the Division of Rail at Caltrans might be on the line, and she might be able to speak to that. But Vallejo is a very interesting market. It's one that the state is interested in. There also is the ferry service there. So all of these things are going to come with trade-offs, but we're definitely looking at a station when we talk about serving Vallejo, that route. There would definitely be a station considered.
But that doesn't seem to have entered, at least not on the presentation that you showed us today, as a major factor of what you analyzed.
Yeah, I think it's built into the technical complexity and the operations. It's kind of buried in the whole thing, but I do want to make clear that there is a planned station stop at that location. And Buzz, I believe we accounted for the time for that.
We did.
Yeah.
To provide an apples-to-apples comparison for each route, they have a uniform, same number of stations between Richmond and Sassoon Fairfield for each of the options. But yes, there was a stop in the Vallejo area.
Okay. And yeah, and obviously I was thinking the same thing as you, that Vallejo creates an entirely different market, right? Because of the interactions there with things like the ferry and population growth, even areas like American Canyon that are growing, that are nearby. So nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that was included. It sounds like it is. Thanks for the presentation.
Very good. Director Saltzman.
Thank you. A couple things. So we're obviously really far out from having a project, but how are you going to assess the equity implications of the different options? Looking at, if you go the Vallejo route, you gain a Vallejo station, but it also means you lose the Martinez station, which means people in eastern Contra Costa County have to drive quite far or probably take a whole lot of different buses to get on different agencies to get out to one of the stations. I mean, to get from there to Richmond or to get up to Vallejo, it's not quick if you're coming from Antioch, Pittsburgh. And also Central Contra Costa County won't have any access either. They'll be driving pretty far. And at that point, they're driving an hour, they're probably just gonna kind of drive the whole way. So I think these are all things that just need to be considered as we move forward. Again, I know it's early, and so you have to look at all of these things. And then, so if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it. But also, could you explain more, if we're going on our own route and freight isn't there, we're then on the hook for fully funding this and not just funding it, to build it, but to maintain it. We've seen some other items in our agenda today where we're sharing costs on the maintenance. It means moving forward on this part, we'd be doing all of our own, right? Which again, we'd have to find the funds for, but is that being considered as well?
Sure, I'll be happy to answer that. So we're going to punt for right now on any equity analysis for that planning phase, which would be after this next one, which will be more engineering feasibility. Then we'll gather, after the engineering is well understood in terms of where it has to go, then we would go into the planning phase of study where we would consider things like equity, the market, the impacts of switching service, all those kind of things would be considered at that point.
Are we confident enough that both will move forward and be possible to do engineering wise? Because what if only one seems okay to do and then we find out there are major equity implications of that one? Like how are we approaching that?
I think we're going to look more. We don't have enough detail to eliminate anything or say that there's a fatal flaw, but we may learn that in the next. We'll have another whittling down of alternatives. We will keep in mind that a route may not be feasible, or may not be easy, but we may want to look at it and keep it in play because of the equity concerns or the new market concerns, any plethora of things. If you can just remind me, the second part of the question was
if we go our own where it's a route without freight, what does that mean for the cost both upfront and ongoing?
It definitely has implications that depending on who would control the right of way, right now that is I believe it's freight owned, it's short line? Short line owned. So we wouldn't own the right of way necessarily. We'd have to talk about purchase, but maybe the short line maintains it. We'd have to enter into agreements there. That's another complexity. The other piece is the smart service might extend into Vallejo and share that corridor, and maybe they connect with the ferry service, and maybe that's a way to address serving that community. There's many options still available, so we're really just keeping our eyes open and flagging things that we see. At this point, we'll do a little deeper dive in the next round to see how the routes pair out with engineering, more engineering analysis, and then we'll pause, take stock of what that was, consider moving ahead with these equity and planning considerations, but we need to assemble funding in that phase of it in the looks ahead. But exactly what you're saying is what we would be looking to do in the future.
And I would say any study for this project, the existing bridge, reconstruction or maintenance of that would be a real alternative. You would look at, an improvement and the impacts of that improvement and whether that made sense given all the benefits of that project.
Very exciting. I don't see any other board member questions or comments. Can you describe what the resolution would achieve as we get ready to hear public comment? Let's see what the resolution.
Yeah, so the resolution that we have before you is essentially would reinforce moving ahead with the highest performing corridor analysis, which is the 4 routes, the 2 routes in the Vallejo corridor and the 2 routes on the shoreline corridor. Basically, it's the east and the west of existing corridor options, like east and west of the existing rail bridge. There's different options there, or east and west of I-80.
Thank you very much.
So that's what we're looking for.
Wonderful thoughts and very, very clear and robust study that's been taking place. Do we have any requests for public comment remotely?
Yes, we do. No in-person speaker cards received, but we have 4 hands raised on Zoom.
We have how many?
4.
Okay. Very good. So we'll take them in order, and I think we'd like to ask that they focus their comments within 3 minutes.
Yes. We will have a timer displayed.
Okay.
Mark Barnbaum.
Okay, Mike, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Just testing the sound quality. I'm very intrigued by the Vallejo route over the shoreline route. One observation I could see, there's been some talk during the board comment and staff about a potential station in Vallejo, which I could see not only as a connection to the ferry and perhaps Soul Trans Express bus service as well. I know that wasn't mentioned, but also Vallejo, let it be mentioned right now, is also the site of a Six Flags park. And that might be very intriguing for families to learn that there's train service to Vallejo in the future, whereas that is not currently the case. But I also observed in the upper check mark on the orange alignment, just outside the Sassoon City Station, it looks like, and it's kind of covered, there's a proposed station I could see possibly either in downtown Fairfield or at the Cordelia interchange, where Highway 12, Interstate 80, and Interstate 680 practically come together. And that doesn't exist today either. Let me ask for clarification. As complex as this capital project is, something senses to me that this has to come back to the board for another project update, despite some other capital projects perhaps coming to the board in calendar year 2023. So as I close my comments, Chair Saylor or any other board member or staff, do you have a rough or estimated timeline when this might be planned to come back to the board in 2023 as progress goes forward on this particular item? Thank you.
Mike, thank you. We will hold a response until we have heard public comment, and there may be some brief comments in response. Who's our next public commenter?
Doug?
Doug? Okay.
Doug Kerr, please go ahead.
Okay, this is Doug Kerr, Rail Passenger Association in California. We advocate strongly for connections, and what I'd like to see considered here, particularly involving the shoreline route, there are more trains that go through here than Capitol Corridor. There are Amtrak long distance trains, the Zephyr and the Coast Starlight, and there are also the San Joaquin trains. And Martinez right now is an excellent transfer point amongst all of those trains. And I'm concerned that if this moves over to Vallejo, that we lose that connection. So I'd like to have this be considered, that there is more passenger train traffic here than just the Capitol Corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Next comment?
Derek Sagehorn, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Derek Sagehorn. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to thank staff for the work on this report. I have a couple of concerns I wanted to highlight. One, as Director Rayburn noted, the freight grades that are considered here would implicate additional costs and length of construction. And so if we're going to be kind of making decisions, advancing concepts with freight corridors in mind, I hope that there's some type of value received or committed from UPRR and other freight railroads in exchange for designing or advancing design on something that will help them. So, additional slots or allowing overhead canton area or something like that. That needs to be part of kind of any kind of negotiation on that. And then second, I just wanted to, hope that as we move forward into eventually a planning process, is that we're using the work that the Link 21 programs has done on markets for the mega region, as well as the fair study, which I believe should be coming back next year, and dynamically score both Martinez and Vallejo in terms of potential for change fare policy in terms of reducing fares and different fare structures. So just looking forward to this coming back and getting it further refined and developed. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. And I think we have one more.
Another hand went up, Chair Saylor, so we have 2 hands left. Next is Shannon Simmons.
Shannon Simmons.
Yes.
Very good.
Please go ahead.
Good morning. This is Shannon Simons. I'm with Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transit. And I just wanted to reiterate to Jim's point from the state's perspective that this is also a big priority, and we're excited to be partnering with Capital Corridor on this study and the future phases of the project development and ultimately into project delivery. To the question of Vallejo, like Jim said, the state is really interested in looking through this study at the opportunities to serve potentially different markets, really factoring in some of those equity and housing and land use considerations that were mentioned. And so, we support this. We're excited to have this at the board today and excited to continue to keep this project moving as quickly as possible so we can make decisions on the next phase of feasibility and move into some of those more planning and equity considerations to ultimately get this in the pipeline for some of the state and federal funding opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you for speaking, and thanks for your partnership on this. It sounds like a wonderful effort. And we have one more commenter.
Liz Ames.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm Liz Ames. I'm one of your BART directors, and I just want to thank the staff, the state, Capital Corridor, even Spur, I think even proposed, I believe, this route seems to be preferred, which could be the Vallejo corridor. But I really appreciate this analysis because I've been a big proponent of replacing the existing bridge between Martinez and Benicia. And I think this is a fabulous study, and I look forward to seeing the new infrastructure that really proposes a route away from the shoreline, because we've got sea level rise, and we also have a tremendous opportunity to grow freight in the region, the rail freight. I've met with the ports and they all want to expand except for Richmond. So I appreciate this very much, and I look forward to the outcome and hopefully the funding. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz. Good to hear from you. Okay. Rob or Jim, do you have any comments suggested by the public comment?
I don't have any specific comments. I think there's a lot that we heard, and you can hear the planning part of it coming out, right? But we're going to take some, I'll call these baby steps to get ready for that engagement, because we're not there yet, and we need to understand. And we'll have to go back in time when we do the planning and say, why did we not keep this route there? And we'll have the reasons for that. But we're going to. We hear all those things. We anticipate all those comments about the freights, about communities that lose or win. So this is a very complex topic for a future board to hear. And I would guess probably in the fall, we might be back, hopefully with a more refined study, and we'll be back to this board. And as we leave here, I do want to give my own personal thanks to Jim Spearing. It's been a pleasure working with you over these years, and always appreciated the guidance that you gave staff and the wisdom that you've imparted. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You snuck that in. Nice job. All right. And so that's I think we're clear. We need a motion to approve the resolution number 22-37.
Second.
So we have a motion from Rayburn and a second from Saltzman. Is there any further discussion? Okay, please call roll.
Chair Saylor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Perales.
Yes.
Director Allen. Director Dufty. Director Freericks.
Aye.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Holmes.
Aye.
Director Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Director Jane.
Yes.
Director Lee, Director McPartlin, Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Price, Director Price, Director Rayburn,
Yay.
Director Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Spearing. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. That's an exciting project. Item number 4, legislation and funding update.
Thank you. And your packet includes a summary of current federal and state legislative items. I do want to highlight a few things. First, as I mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to host Jennifer Mitchell, the Deputy Administrator for FRA, on Monday. We started our visit with a joint tour of the Jack London Square area with the City of Oakland and the Oakland Port staff. We had an opportunity to visit stations in Emeryville and Oakland. And then we shared some of our challenges on the right-of-way in our corridor and showed some of those projects like High Street and talked about how we really think there's an opportunity here to work with FRA and USDOT to address some of these safety issues in our corridor. We are going to continue to seek opportunities to bring federal officials out to our corridor. We've extended those invitations, and if any of you have inquiries from congressional staff or from congressional representatives, we would be very interested in hosting. And so that invitation is open to anyone who would like to join us. We have also been supporting a number of local efforts to seek dollars under the grade separation program. We did submit letters of support for 2 projects in the city of Dixon and in Yolo County. So we're fingers crossed on those, and we think those are strong applications, and we are hopeful that they will get funded. And then I also want to mention that there's an active notice of funding opportunity under the CRISI program. We are seeking approximately $40 million in that program to do the last little piece. We've tried once before for our Sac-Roseville third track project. I am actually jumping on a plane right after this meeting, going to DC, and we'll be participating in the Placer Business Alliance DC trip. This is one of their top projects. We feel very confident in that project, and we hope to come back to you maybe even in February if we're lucky and say we got it, but certainly not too long after that. Lastly, I want to mention, this relates to Jim's excellent presentation. We are watching FRA's work on the corridor identification program, and what it looks like they're trying to do is fund planning efforts for intercity rail in the country. And we think it ties very much into our vision planning effort that we did before. So we believe there'll be an opportunity to match. There's a 10% match requirement, match state TIRSIP dollars. The state has also provided some opportunities here for planning dollars, match the federal program, and really do an in-depth overview of our study, update the vision plan, and maybe get into some more depth on that. We have, as you know, been partnering with BART on the Link 21 project, and one of the really fantastic things that's coming out of that project is we're getting data like we've never had before about markets, and that's particularly important given the ever-shifting nature of travel in the region. And so we'll come back to you when we hear a little bit more details about that FRA program, but we think this really works well for us, and we do think, again, we've been an example to FRA about how agencies like ours can move forward with intercity rail. And that is it for actually, I've got one more slide. Go to the next slide, please. I do have one, that's it on my update for background. We do have one action item today, and this relates to a CRISI application by one of our local communities. We normally do not bring these to the board, but given the sensitivities of concerns in the city of Oakland, we wanted to bring this to you today. The city of Oakland is seeking our support on a funding opportunity to improve this corridor through the Jack London stretch. And I do want to note that this application does not include the section in front of the proposed Oakland A's ballpark. That is not in this application. So we do think that this corridor is very much in need of improvement, and we, at staff level, would recommend that the board take action to support this project. And with your support, we would submit a letter of support as part of the CRISI application for the city of Oakland. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Just a comment. We did have an opportunity to meet with the Oakland mayor and staff about 3 weeks ago or so. And in that conversation, This was following up on our board's actions on the topic of safe rail crossings in the vicinity of the port and the proposed arena. That conversation I thought was productive. There's still some need to be more and more clear about the interests and directions that this board needs to be pursuing to make sure that we're doing everything we can for safety. This letter that Rob has presented for us came out of that conversation. There was a request from the Oakland representatives that we sign on to a support letter for their application. Initially, it was a much broader proposal. This is I would urge the board to approve this request as Rob's presented it, because we need to find things we can agree on and pursue those together, and leave the things that we have yet to work through on the table for future discussions. I would urge you to approve this request. Mr. Rayburn?
Thank you, Chair Saylor, and thank you, Rob, for following up with the City of Oakland and negotiating a position where we have something we can support. We need those improved crossings outside of the area of the proposed ballpark, whether the ballpark is built or not. And so moving forward with this makes tremendous sense.
Okay. Are there any questions from any member of the board who's participating remotely? Is there any hands? Are there any hands?
There are no director hands raised.
Any further questions okay. Do we have any public comment on the legislative and funding update?
Yes, I did not receive any speaker cards, but I see 2 hands raised on Zoom.
Okay.
First being Mike Barnbaum.
Okay, Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair Saylor. Thank you, Managing Director Paget, and everyone on the presentation. I wanted to kind of piggyback on Mr. Paget's comments about what you have in the slide up right now, along with Chair Saylor and your comments about this particular focus. First of all, I want to say what a very different 180, if you will, from just a couple or so board meetings ago, when there was a discussion of filing court documents originally against the project, specifically focusing on the thought of lack of addressing this item. But I've been working alongside with the city and the team that's working with the Oakland Athletics Investment Group Limited Liability Corporation on getting everything in working order and really improving the Jack London and Howard terminal area. So I just want to say thank you for the big change in mindset from several months ago. Thank you for this presentation. And I want to say, Chair Saylor, from your comments, if that is indeed, as I gather, a motion to support the letter writing for the city of Oakland and moving forward with this, I would be humbled and honored to second your comments and motion and move forward with this much needed project, as it is bigger than baseball, and it will definitely move the city of Oakland and Oakland Athletics Investment Group Limited Liability Corporation forward on a very similar and parallel path to what you see now in downtown Sacramento, of what happened with Sacramento Basketball Holdings Incorporated and the city of Sacramento to improve the downtown area, maintain the team, and provide over there a project that was bigger than basketball. So thank you. And yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to go on record to second your comments and move forward with the recommendation and resolution before you today.
Thank you, Mike. Next comment, please.
Next speaker is Nicole Ferrara.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Ferrara. I'm the Major Projects Division Manager at the City of Oakland. And I've had the pleasure of working with General Manager Paget. Excuse me, I'm blanking on your title. And have enjoyed the collaboration and appreciate the opportunity to really, channel the energy around the proposed development to focus on things that Oaklanders really need, regardless of whether or not this potential development moves forward. And we're really excited about this segment of Embarcadero West. It hasn't been really deeply investigated since it was originally built over 150 years ago. And it's in dire need of safety improvements for many reasons, for both basic safety needs, helping people with disabilities access this corridor, enhancing reliability for your service, and for freight rail as well. So we're really hopeful that you all will support this letter of support request, and that this, marks the beginning of a very collaborative relationship as we move forward. I guess the last thing I just want to mention is that this is also part of the ACTC RCEP program of projects that was mentioned earlier in the agenda to help address rail safety throughout Alameda County. And we are, as a city, taking on this segment and advancing this segment for the public.
Thank you, Nicole. We appreciate your help here. So, friends, I think we're ready for a motion. I think the motion would be to authorize our managing director to sign a letter on behalf of the board in support of the Oakland application as presented. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Great. So we have a motion from Rayburn with second from Saltzman. Any further discussion? All in favor say, we'll go to the roll call.
Chair Saylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Perales,
Yes.
Director Allen, Director Dufty, Director Freericks,
Aye.
Director Harris,
Aye.
Director Holmes,
Aye.
Director Haudeshelt,
Yes.
Director Jane,
Yes.
Director Lee, Director McPartlin, Director Miller, Director Miller,
Oh, sorry. Aye.
Director Price,
Aye.
Director Rayburn,
Yay.
Director Saltzman,
Yes.
Director Spearing. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. Rob, you have your next two items, Managing Director's Report and Project and Program Updates.
Thank you. I have just a couple of things to cover today in the Managing Director's Report.
If we could have Rob use the microphone, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry. I'm struggling this morning with these new mics.
The colors, you'd think it'd be green.
I know, you'd think so. So I have a couple things to cover today, but before I do that, I want to just take a moment here to thank all of you who are not going to be at our next meeting for all of your service. And those who are here today got us through the pandemic, and we're not through it, but got us through the last couple years, which have not been easy in any way. And I, on a personal note, I want to thank a lot of you have helped me with issues in your communities, with advocacy, with joining me for events, for getting the word out, and then for standing with me when we're having difficult decisions in front of us that maybe aren't what we hope for. And I'm feeling pretty good about where we're headed. And I'm hoping that all of you come back and join us for meetings, and we will honor you for all of your service that you've given us over the years. And I, in particular, would like to thank Chair Saylor, who couldn't thank himself for all his service, all your friendship and your mentoring over the last couple years as we worked through a lot of these issues. We are going to bring that new station to Davis. We'll do that along with lots of other things in the next several years. So appreciate that. And of course, even though Director Spearing might not want me to say it yet again, we're going to embarrass him again. None of us would be here were it not for Director Spearing. Our riders wouldn't have this service, and we wouldn't serve as an example for the country for what intercity rail can be. So there are not enough words to say to honor him for all your service. So anyway, so that's my kickoff here. So now we'll talk about on-time performance. Just don't pay attention to that part. If I can go to the next slide here. And actually, I forgot one other thing I want to mention. It's a little bit off topic. You all know we have had Climate Corps interns as for years at Capital Corridor. It's been our way to grow participation in our industry, bring people right out of either undergrad or grad school for a year. It's a fellowship program. And Shirley Chen on our team started through that program and has been just a fantastic contributor to our program. I want to introduce Anne-Marie Wong, wave here, and Lucille Wen to our team. So you will see them on occasion, and you're going to certainly see their work over the coming months. All right, now I'll get to the data here. So this is already, Priscilla talked about this already. This will be in the annual report. One of the things that I asked my team when I saw this slide, I said, am I reading this correctly? So we doubled our ridership and revenue between 21 and 22, and we did. So, when you step back a little bit and you get away from going back to history and you look at where we're headed in a good direction. And we're going to hopefully bring you good numbers in a year from now that'll keep this going. Our OTP is too low. We talked a lot about what we're trying to do there. We're going to keep working on that. Go to the next slide, please. So I do want to give an update on this 527, 529 service issue. I know we've heard, and again, I want to tell the folks if they're listening, we appreciate feedback from our customers. We're going to be out doing our business plan in the next couple months. That's a great opportunity for people to give feedback. I like it when people in Placer County tell me there's not enough service, because when I'm out there in Sacramento or in DC trying to get funding for that project, I know I'm doing the work that the people in Placer County want us to do and this board wants us to do. We did change our service. As you probably remember, before the pandemic, we had our one train out of Auburn left at 6:35 a.m. As we did our service reductions, one of the things that we did do is that particular train didn't run for a little while. We started our service a little bit earlier, and part of our hope there was to build that San Francisco market. We did do that with some riders who are upset now that we're moving it back to 6:35 a.m. And we are looking at data there. We are seeing a bump in ridership. That did happen. We saw about a 23% bump in ridership that first week. In particular, out at Auburn and Rockland, where people really were not riding with that change because a lot of those folks are headed into either Sacramento or Davis, and it was just too early. Those numbers are coming up, and this is now more consistent with what we're seeing in the rest of the corridor. Again, we're not done. We're going to add service there. So, I want everyone to know that. The other thing we're going to continue to do is work in partnership with Placer County and look at ways that, like all the transit systems in our corridor, we can partner together and do stuff efficiently with public resources that are going to be very tight here in the next couple of years as the transit business recovers. If you can go to the next slide, please. And then, boy, I didn't realize I was ending on a sour note here, but so the freight strike. So I think you know that that the resolution of this was not a permanent resolution. It was an interim resolution, and actually to try to work through some things. And unfortunately, we're not in a great place here with this freight strike. And what it looks like is going to happen as of now is that we're going to potentially see a strike likely on December 4th. It could be on December 9th, but a good chance, I would say, I can't predict the future, that could happen. Several of the unions have turned down the package that was offered. And again, this is freight. This is not our Amtrak workers here. Have turned it down, and it looks tough, like a tough road ahead. And so congressional intervention could happen. I don't know that any of us can predict what would happen there. One of the things that's a little bit different than the last time is that we're going to be able to communicate more proactively with our customers. We were asked not to do that previously. There was a concern that it would get in the way of negotiations, and there was a hope that we would get to resolution. And so we didn't let people know until really right before the strike was going to happen, which is not in line with our customer service standards at Capitol Corridor, but we understand the sensitivities of that issue, so we adhere to that. So we're going to start getting the word out here shortly. Priscilla is going to be in the lead on that effort, and we want people to know what's coming. And we'll keep you posted. I'll send emails out, and we'll give updates to the board as we hear any more updates. So with that covers everything in my report. I'll be happy to take questions on any of those topics or any of the updates on the list below that for the next item.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions? Any questions remotely?
I don't see any director hands raised.
Okay. We'll move on to, I'm going to ask that we take item 7 out of order, which is public comments, and then we'll conclude with the board director reports. So this is an opportunity for people online or present with us to make public comment on any topic related to the board's work that is not on the agenda or anything that you just heard that you'd like to comment on. Do we have any requests for public comment?
We have 2 hands raised, no in-person speaker requests received. First online hand is Mike Barnbaum.
Okay, and before we take you, I want to mention that we did receive several email messages that are part of the public record that we all had an opportunity to read, and those will be a part of today's meeting record as well. So, Mike, do you have a comment?
Yes. Rob, thank you for the presentation. Just kind of a follow-up to the 527, 529 issue. Thank you for bringing that up. I know there was a very passionate Placer County Transportation Planning Agency board meeting in September, just prior to the October 3rd schedule change going into effect. Do you foresee, prior to more service, with the conclusion of the third track project, to at least get to the 3 round trips, in the interim, either a Placer Commuter Express or an Amtrak Thruway bus addressing the concerns raised by the public at the last board meeting, to get at least a Thruway bus connection from Auburn, Rockland, and Roseville to Sacramento to meet 527, say starting in January to kick off the new year. Is that a possibility? And then I do want to just comment and say to particularly the board members that will not be serving starting next year because their term came up. Chair Saylor, thank you so much for your service over the years. Got to know you very well, both through this board and service on the Yolo County Transportation District Board. Lots of service improvements over there with the restructuring of the Route 42, more frequent service now. So that's great. We were able to implement that while you were still a serving board member. And to board member Spearing and the comments made, yes, we would not be where we are today, Mr. Spearing, without your service and leadership. And I hope that while we've had some considerations like naming the Steve Cohn Passageway in Sacramento, the Vacaville Station in honor of Tom Hannigan, that there is something to consider with your name on it at the Sassoon City Station. I think that would be an appropriate honor for your service and dedication over the years with this board. And thank you so much. And I'll conclude my comments there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Next comment, please.
Next speaker is Paul Sampner.
Okay.
Paul, please go ahead.
Thank you, Clerk. Paul Saffner from Placer County. I was the one to organize the coalition to save Train 527, and I just appreciate Rob's attention to us. And I would like to also submit to the record a request for a bus connection from Placer County to Sacramento to accommodate 527, and then we will continue to advocate with Capital Corridor staff and the JPA Board of Directors for more service to Placer County, because it seems like a lot of folks in the Bay Area are moving to Placer County and then working in the Bay Area. And also, Rob, do you have numbers for the ridership for 529 for the second, third, fourth week? I know you mentioned about the first week, but just wanted to see if there was an increase in the subsequent weeks from the first week for 529. Thank you.
And thank you, Paul. We appreciate your support for passenger rail service throughout our region. And I know that you've also Paul's also requested, and we've got other public comments for a passenger advisory group of some kind. And I know that Director Rayburn and the board will consider that discussion at some point in the future. And typically we receive public comment, but we typically don't get into substantive responses for lots of good reasons, including that the Brown Act says that you have to have stuff on the agenda in order to discuss it. So we're able to have brief responses, but typically we can't do that. So what I'd suggest that if someone has a question, continue to email specific questions to Mr. Padgett, and I know he'll be responsive to those inquiries. And thank you, Paul, and I look forward to your continued advocacy and support of passenger rail in our region. Are there any other public comments?
I don't see any additional hands raised.
Okay, very good. So that brings us to the board director reports. Does anyone online have something they'd like to share?
Yes, Director Harris has his hand raised.
Director Harris.
Yeah, Chair Saylor, I'd just like to say thank you to the board. I've really enjoyed the experience working on CCJPA over the last few years, from before the pandemic and then through the pandemic. I've really enjoyed, seeing the service come back after a very difficult time. Appreciate all of the people who work on it. Rob and Jim, pleasure to know you. Lucas and Don and I had a really wonderful adventure one time looking at various aspects of the trail. And I'd just like to say I've really enjoyed my experience on CCJPA. So thank you all.
Thanks, Jeff. Lucas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick points. I mean, I think, these types of occasions are pretty bittersweet, especially when you have gotten to know people and work closely with folks for a long time. A couple of quick points. Firstly, just thank you to you, Mr. Chair, for your service for the past 2 years and your service on this board. For those directors that may or may not know, Supervisor Saylor is going to be retiring here at the end of this year. And I was very fortunate enough to be voted in by the voters in Yolo County to replace him, Yolo County Board of Supervisors, starting in January. So I have very big shoes to fill. And as you know, from seeing the last 2 years of him chairing this board, you understand why, among many other reasons. So thank you for your work and service. Also, to Director Harris, Director Perales, there's others certainly, but I really have enjoyed serving with you all and seeing you in action in your respective jurisdictions, and know how much you care about this agency. But I specifically really want to just make a few comments with regard to Director Spearing. I am so grateful to have served now with Director Spearing for the last decade, since I have been on the City Council in Davis and serving on this board. And Jim took me under his wing right right away when I first started serving about almost 10 years ago on this board, and really showed me the ropes, and I'm grateful for that. And I am just so appreciative of his decades of service to his community in Sassoon, but also in Solano County, and then also, of course, just the Bay Area, but and in Northern California mega region. And your service has been exemplary and is truly a model for others to follow. So I really appreciate all that service and your work and dedication, and wish you all the best in the years ahead. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frericks. Is there anybody else on a remote who has a hand up?
Yes, Director Haudeshelt has his hand raised.
Very good. Bruce?
Well, I don't know what the year was, but there was a young man in Casper, Wyoming, who I learned, and some of you on the board may know this as well, told me the story about the railroad and his family. And so, Chair Saylor, thank you for sharing that story with me. I understand how you're so rooted in rail and passenger rail, and thank you for your service on the board and chairing the board the last couple of years. So thank you. I look forward to celebrating you in person at our February meeting. I hope that's what we're going to be doing. Thank you for your service to Yolo County. And then I was pleased, and Director Padgett, I don't know which airport you're landing in, but if you're landing at Dulles like I did yesterday, you'll get to ride the Silver Line extension into the city. That's only been 30 years in the making. So, but it's super convenient, and for those flying in and flying to Dulles and have business in the DC, in the nation's capital, it's just a wonderful addition to it. And then lastly, thank you everyone for the vote of support. As vice chair, I look forward to having conversations with you between now and our next meeting. So I learn more deeply what your interests are and how we can move the mega region forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else remotely?
I don't see any additional hands.
Thank you very much. Anybody here? Yes, Raul.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for being tardy. I missed my BART train, so I caught the later one. But I did join in over the phone just to hear the opening comments and follow along before I arrived. But I wanted to make sure I could make it in person for at least one meeting as your vice chair. So it has been interesting over the last 2 years to serve completely remotely, not only obviously in this role, but in a number of roles and hats that I wear. But it has been a pleasure. I'm bummed that I can't continue on and move on, continue to represent and give a voice to the San Jose region, the South Bay on this board. But I appreciate Sud's Shane and excited for him being able to stay on and keep a bit of consistency, because I know we've had a lot of transition and I've been that consistent voice for our region. And I just want to say thank you to our chair, Don. It's been terrific to work with you and Rod and all the prep and the work that we've done over the last couple of years, and excited for the future of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Mr. Rayburn?
Well, I'm honored and humbled to have the support of my colleagues on the board to fill these big shoes. One of those shoes is in Yolo County. The other shoe has been in the entire 8-county region. And it's going to be difficult, but maybe not as difficult as what you experienced going through the pandemic. I actually see a very bright future, and I want to share just something that I've been reading recently. Railway Age in October 22nd published something called Rolling into Orlando, and the Brightline train has over 150% of its ridership recovered from the pre-pandemic period. looking at that article, it gives a lot of information about how they built that recovery. In particular, I think it's worthwhile for our business case model and discussion to have discussions about mode competition. For example, between Miami and Orlando, they're looking at trying to capture 5% of the overall travel market. And I like those kind of metrics that we're putting ourselves right up against the automobile. And that should be where we want to prevail and pull those passengers in to our service. As well, one of our former managing directors, Gene Skorpowski, is quoted in the article. He's been consulting with them. They have, the Bright Line is also bright in its stations. They want to have hotel-like standards that attracts the passengers. And that's something that we've had in the Capital Corridor that our passengers really love. And so putting the passengers first, keeping the trains on time, and those are the top priorities for us. Everything else is somewhat below that, but I'm really optimistic given the managing director and the capable staff we have, the wonderful colleagues we have on the board. We're going to miss Mr. Sparing. I had the pleasure of serving on the Vision Planning Committee with Director Sparing. And of course, I've watched him for many decades in the MTC. He's been a true leader. So I'm optimistic about the new year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's anybody else down here? Mr. Spearing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a lot of people are thanking me and recognizing me, but, you know, a lot of people made this possible. But, you know, I just would like to, and I'll go through this as quickly as possible for those of you that really don't know the history of this. The Capital Corridor, there was a study, a federal funded study, Vic Fazio, Congressman Fazio. It was the I-80 Strategic Corridor Study, and I served on that, and Helen Thompson was the chair, I was the vice chair. And out of that study, it identified intercity rail service in this corridor needed to be enhanced. And at the time, Caltrans was running the service. And so the intercity rail service, which Helen and I swapped, and so I became chair. And so we started negotiating and talking to Caltrans about the service. Assemblymember Tom Hannigan and Senator Kopp got involved in this conversation. And so and as we started talking about it, myself and Assemblymember Hannigan, we were really concerned about the representation, you know, because the northern counties, you know, Solano, Yolo, Sacramento, and Placer really weren't getting the representation in this corridor that they really need to participate. Because if you look at the future of this corridor, which is still ahead of us, those are going to be markets that this service is going to serve. And so a lot of discussion. Senator Kopp wanted the BART board to be, you know, the board of this Capital Corridor. And he also wanted BART to be the managing partner of this agency for managing it. And so those two areas is where we really got into very heated discussions, you know, and with Senator Kopp, and either ever worked with him, you know what I mean by heated. And so we finally compromised that we would have representatives from all of the counties. And part of that was to have this strong advocacy from Placer all the way down to Santa Clara that our representatives would be, you know, supporting this. And that did happen as we put this together. And then we had the negotiations with Caltrans. And the reason why we abandoned Caltrans was they were not responsive to the local communities. And the reason I'm passing this on to my board members here is that the real strength of this was to have that local representation. And Caltrans was very resistant. They weren't working with the local communities. A lot of the communities wanted to start putting feeder service into it. And so Very lengthy discussions. Finally, we had to go to the Secretary of BT&H because Caltrans, we really weren't getting anywhere. And so we finally got BT&H on board. And, Senator Kopp finally agreed that BART would be the operator, but it would be approved by this board. And, I certainly, if you go back in the history of BART, at the time we were forming this agency, BART was in total disarray. I mean, the board members, they were in the headlines every week, and the board members weren't cooperating, working together. And so we didn't want to get drug into that drama. And so that was a compromise, that we'd have the representation that you see today, and we would have, BART would be the operator. And to BART's credit, I can honestly say we made the right decision. And when I look at, I think the first managing directors, Wilson and Dorothy Duggar, Grace Granigan, and Bob Howard, and Bob, I want to thank you and take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership with the Blue Ribbon and bringing this region together on these tremendous challenges that we're faced with transit. And, it was through your leadership that we got consensus on all of the recommendations that came out of that Blue Ribbon Committee. And you rallied the troops of all the large operators. I want to thank you for that. And so, as we went through this, I've been very fortunate. Our first director was Bill Fleischer. Then we had Gene Skorpowski, David Kotrowski, and Rob Padgett. And all four of them, and you really have to appreciate, all four of them are just experts in their field, well respected, not only in this region, but in Washington, D.C. Every one of them is known in Washington. And so I want to thank them. And this staff that we have here, this service we wouldn't be providing would not be with this staff. And so I want to thank the staff. The other thing I just want to close with the fact that, we touch the riders. That's why we have the success that we have. And, we're not always concerned about the operations, we're concerned about the service we provide to those passengers. And I think that touch of passenger surveys, the service that we provide there, I don't think is matched anywhere in this country. And so I just want to thank the staff for that. And, I've just been very blessed. I always say this is, I'm just an ordinary guy surrounded by extraordinary people. And this staff here are extraordinary people. And, I want to thank this board, past boards, Chair Saylor, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your leadership through these very tough times that we've had before us. But this is one of the agencies that I was involved in the formation that I have extreme pride in. And it's something that's going to serve this region for generations to come and with great potential. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you and all the board members. Thank all of you for the dedication that you've made to this. And we've had great board members over the years. It's funny, how many years have we been in existence? 20? Yeah, I mean, that's a long time. And so but anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just appreciate having the opportunity. I just really felt that it was important to just give that little brief history as how this came about. And I always remember, I left Senator Kopp's office in Sacramento when I was driving home. This one I had first had a car phone, and he chewed me out from Sacramento till I got home about this issue. But Assemblyman Hannigan and I, we prevailed, and I think what we put here is really serving this region. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for permitting me to make those comments.
Oh, Jim, I'm so happy you did. And there's one of the benefits of the Zoom environment is that history is now recorded on our meeting record, and we'll be able to look at it and back. Wonderful, wonderful story. And the agency is a wonderful story. The reference that Bruce made to the kid in Wyoming was to me, and my grandfather was a section maintenance guy on the railroad. His homestead didn't work out. You can't really do much in northeastern Wyoming on 160 acres. And so he got a job working for the railroad. And about 50 years later, I did the same. And so I started my connection to the railroad as a Gandy dancer on a section crew maintaining 9 miles of rail. And our job was very simple. The performance indicator, Mr. Rayburn, was the train should not fall off the railroad. If it didn't, day after day, successful. And we also use that, those little exercises in algebra where they say if the train is coming this fast and it left the station 10 minutes ago and you're going toward it, your arithmetic, your mathematics better work out right, because we did that over and over and over to get off the railroad in time. Because I guess the second mission was don't let the train run over you. And so as long as you did those two things, you were good. I couldn't be more pleased to have been able to serve on this board. Jim, Lucas, and I have been participants in this group called Mega Region, where MTC, the SACOG board, and the San Joaquin Council of Governments Board of Directors has created a working group to tackle issues across our, I guess it's six counties, so it's 16 counties, including the 9 counties in the Bay Area. And that is, that's the kind of lens through which we need to view the real things that matter, the things that we can do. Our unit of action has got to be regional, and the Capital Corridor is the operational tool for mobility around this mega region through Link 21 and through the other work that we're doing. This is real, and it is the future. Robert's right, in my view, that the future is much rosier than the past for our service. And I want to echo Jim's comments about the team, the professionalism of this Capital Corridor team, and our host, our operating partner, Bart. This has been an incredible relationship. You've all done such good work, and the connectivity that you bring to the region and to the country. I just couldn't be more proud of the work that you all do. So thank you all for the opportunity to be a part of this team. And with that, I think we're done for the day, are we not?
Chair Saylor, Director.
Oh, what?
Director Price has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Mr. Price.
Go
ahead.
I have the greatest admiration and respect for what the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority has been able to do. And I'm particularly pleased with individuals like yourselves who have made such a significant difference in getting people to and from the places where they want to go by rail. And I'm especially pleased that the Hannigan's Fairfield Vacaville train station is in existence. And I really sincerely appreciate your efforts to make certain that access to and from Travis Air Force Base is safe. So thank you very much. And I hope that our paths will cross in the future, and I will plan to do a lot of traveling by rail since I'll no longer be the mayor of the city of Fairfield. So thank you all very much. And I think Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority Board is a stellar group of people who really pay attention to the folks that they're serving. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ditto. Well said. Anything else?
I simply want to share that while our senior statesman, Jim Spearing, was sharing his thoughts, I was looking out at the room of staff and I saw smiles.
Yeah.
And it really is heartwarming to have somebody of his caliber on the board with us, and he will be missed. Thank you, Jim.
So we've come to a conclusion of our meeting. The next meeting of the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority Board of Directors will be February 15th at 10 a.m. And it looks like it's going to be here at BART headquarters again. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.